Imagine the docks of New York City in 1942. The night air is thick with fog, the smell of saltwater mixing with oil, sweat, and smoke. You hear the creak of wooden piers, the splash of black water against rusted hulls, and the distant echo of soldiers marching off to war. But beneath this ordinary wartime scene, something dangerous is happening. Something the American government will never admit openly. German U-boats lurk in the Atlantic, sinking ships that try to leave New York Harbor. The fear is real. One successful enemy sabotage, and America's largest supply line could collapse. Now picture this: desperate intelligence officers walking into smoky backrooms, not to meet admirals or generals, but mafia bosses. Men with scarred faces, sharp suits, and dead-cold eyes. The kind of men who controlled the docks, who decided which ship sailed and which ship sank. To protect New York from German spies, the U.S. Navy makes a secret deal with the mob. It sounds unthinkable, doesn't it? The world's greatest democracy, cutting a deal with America's most feared criminals. But this secret alliance would change the fate of the war. And what happened next would shock even the most hardened generals. Who would you trust in the darkest hour? The year is 1942. The Second World War is raging, and the world is on the brink of collapse. But for now, you stand at the edge of New York Harbor, the city's dark, bustling heart. The fog hangs thick in the air, a creeping blanket of white that swallows up the world. It's not just the fog that sends chills down your spine, though. No, it's the growing unease that something terrible is waiting to happen. Would you trust your own government to protect the harbor, or would you turn to the shadows of the underworld to save your city? You're a U.S. Navy officer, stationed in New York Harbor. The war has begun to seep into every part of American life, and the once vibrant streets of the city are now consumed by the fear of what might come next. New York has become a critical lifeline to the world. The harbor, one of the busiest ports in the world, is crucial to the war effort. But it is also a prime target for the Nazis. German U-boats are lurking off the coast, silently hunting for any ship that tries to leave port. The stakes are high. Each supply ship that leaves the harbor represents not just the food, ammunition, and war materials needed for the soldiers fighting across Europe, but the very survival of the United States. One successful attack, one strike in the dark, and the entire war effort could grind to a halt. But something strange is happening. It's subtle at first, a few unexplained attacks on ships leaving the harbor. At first, the Navy brushes it off as bad luck. Then, another attack. And then, another. Soon, it becomes clear, something is wrong. The U-boats are too well coordinated, too precise. As if they know exactly when to strike, where the ships are, and even the most vulnerable moments of departure. There's more going on here than meets the eye. And that's when you realize, the real threat isn't just the Nazis lurking across the Atlantic. It's something much closer. Something much darker. You stand in the Navy's operations room, watching the intelligence reports pile up. They're all saying the same thing: the harbor is compromised. But no one knows who is behind it. No one knows how it's happening. Yet, a shadow looms over this war, a shadow that's not in uniform. You walk out into the streets of New York, the pulse of the city rushing around you, but your mind is elsewhere. You start hearing rumors, whispers from those who work on the docks. From stevedores to longshoremen, they all speak in hushed tones about the men who control the waterfront. These aren't men in navy blues or army greens. These are men with names like Vito Genovese, Frank Costello, and Lucky Luciano. Men who've carved out an empire of their own, far from the watchful eyes of the government. It dawns on you, the Mafia controls New York's docks. They control who comes and goes. They have the power to move shipments under the radar, to hide what they don't want seen, to dictate the flow of goods in and out of the city. And if they wanted to, they could be a massive threat to the United States. But there's something worse. The enemy knows that, too. The Navy has a terrible choice to make. To save New York Harbor, they may have to turn to the Mafia for help, whether they like it or not. Would you make a deal with the devil to save your country? And that's the question hanging in the air as military commanders, unable to solve the problem on their own, begin to make their way to the backrooms of New York's underworld. The Mafia, who once served as a silent force of the city's streets, is now positioned to decide the fate of the war. The real question is, can you trust them? And if you do, what price will you have to pay? The deal, if struck, won't come with clean hands. The men you're about to deal with have no loyalty to the flag or the Constitution. They care only for what's in their pockets, and what they can control. But at this moment in history, the Navy has no choice. The docks must be secured. The ships must sail without incident. And so, the most unlikely of alliances begins to take shape. The Navy, desperate to protect the harbor, must turn to the Mafia, criminals who have long been untouchable by the law. Their fingerprints are all over the port. They know every creaky pier and every dark alleyway. They know who's moving what, when, and why. It seems unimaginable, America, the land of liberty, being forced into bed with its most feared criminals. The Mafia, with their ties to every crooked politician, every dirty deal, and every smuggling operation, will now become the country's secret weapon in the war. Their street smarts, their ability to control the waterfront, and their grip on New York's underbelly are exactly what the Navy needs. But the stakes are too high for anyone to back out now. The harbor must be defended at all costs. The war must be won. And if that means shaking hands with the devil, then so be it. The next night, you stand on the docks again, watching the fog roll in, but now, you're not alone. The Mafia's men are everywhere, their sharp eyes scanning the horizon, making sure nothing slips by undetected. There's an unspoken tension in the air, a sense of something dangerous stirring just beneath the surface. And you wonder, as you look over the dark water, what happens next, when the shadowy men you've just made a deal with are more dangerous than any enemy you could have imagined? What would you do to win a war without firing a shot? The fog that blankets the harbor is thick, but it's not the only thing obscuring the truth. As the shadows of the Mafia take root in the heart of New York, you're left with a question that gnaws at you every moment. What would you do to win a war without firing a shot? The U.S. Navy has made its decision. With the stakes of the war hanging in the balance, the Mafia is no longer just a nuisance or a group to avoid, they are now a necessary evil. A powerful force of men who control the streets, the docks, and the very lifeblood of New York City. You're a part of the Navy's operations, and right now, you're being led into a meeting that will change the course of the war. As you enter a dimly lit backroom, your heart beats a little faster. The men who sit at the table are not soldiers, not politicians. These are men who have their hands in every vice, every illegal business in the city. They are the hidden power behind New York's waterfront, and now, they hold the key to protecting the harbor. They don't wear uniforms. They don't answer to generals or commanders. But, in this moment, they have something more valuable than medals. Control. Control over every inch of the docks. Control over who moves and who stays. The Navy needs them to help turn the tide of the war. Without their help, New York Harbor could be a sitting duck for German U-boats. But the question lingers, what will the Navy have to sacrifice to get their cooperation? The Mafia is no stranger to dealing in darkness. They don't trust easily, and neither do you. The Navy's offer seems simple. Help us secure the harbor, and we will protect your interests. But even as the words leave your mouth, you can't shake the feeling that the cost will be much higher than anyone realizes. It's not just a matter of protecting the ships. It's a matter of power. The Mafia has always known how to control the flow of goods, how to make things move without question. But now, they're being asked to protect the very lifeblood of the war effort. This is their chance to get something much bigger than money. This is about influence, about securing their place in history. As the days pass, you begin to see the Mafia's power play out. The men they send to the docks are sharp-eyed and cold-hearted. They don't take no for an answer. They have the ear of local politicians, and their influence runs deep into the streets of the city. The moment they step onto the piers, everything shifts. The Navy might give orders, but it's the Mafia who makes sure those orders are followed. But what happens when they start to realize just how much power they really have? The Mafia's men begin to exert control over everything. The loading and unloading of supplies, the timing of shipments, and even the routes the ships take are now dictated by the Mafia. They are no longer just protecting the harbor, they're running it. They have made themselves indispensable. They've become the invisible hand, making sure everything runs smoothly and quietly. However, as the Mafia's influence grows, you start to hear whispers of concern within the Navy. The officers who once trusted their command now wonder, are we still in control, or are we simply being used? In every conversation you overhear, there's a palpable unease. The Mafia's growing power isn't just a concern for the military, it's a concern for the future of the city, the country, and the war itself. How long before their loyalty shifts from the Navy to something else? How long before the Mafia begins to demand more, leverage their newfound power, and start calling the shots themselves? As the weeks pass, the attacks on ships from the German U-boats grow less frequent. The docks remain secure. The Mafia's men have been efficient, ensuring that no sabotage happens under their watch. You begin to think, perhaps the deal wasn't so bad after all. The war effort is moving along. Ships are sailing. Supplies are reaching Europe. Everything seems to be working just fine. But then, you start to notice strange things. The Mafia men have become bolder. They're no longer just keeping things running, they're making moves. You overhear them discussing shipments, not just for the war, but for their own interests. Illegal goods, rare items, things that weren't supposed to be moved. You start to realize that the Mafia is turning this arrangement into something far bigger than just a favor for the Navy. You walk into a back room at the docks one night, and there, you see something that chills you to the bone. A group of Mafia men is talking, but their conversation isn't about German U-boats or protecting the harbor anymore. They're talking about politicians, bribes, deals that go far beyond New York City. They've been using this alliance to build something much more powerful, a network that connects them not just to the docks, but to the highest levels of government. What happens when the very people who were supposed to protect you become the ones you need to fear? Your thoughts race as the gravity of the situation hits you. These men are playing a game with rules of their own making. They aren't just protecting the harbor, they're expanding their empire, using the war as a cover for their most profitable dealings. What began as a simple arrangement to protect the city has now morphed into something else. The Mafia isn't just helping, it's taking control. And now, you must decide, what side are you really on? Is the Navy still your ally? Or is the true power now held by the Mafia? With every passing day, you see the lines blur. The Navy might still be calling the shots, but the Mafia is the one holding the strings. Who really controls the war in the streets? The air is thick with smoke, but it's not the kind of smoke you expect in a wartime setting. It's the kind that rises from a different kind of battlefield. The docks of New York, once a place of industry and livelihood, now feel like the epicenter of something much darker, a silent war of influence, power, and betrayal. Who really controls the war in the streets? The government, or the men who rule them from the shadows? It's late at night, and the sound of distant warships can barely be heard through the thick mist that covers the harbor. The streets around the docks are empty, save for a few stray workers. But you know better. The men who truly control this territory are not just those in military uniforms, but the men in sharp suits, the ones who wear their power like a second skin. They are the Mafia, and they have woven themselves so deeply into the fabric of New York that it's impossible to tell where the city's government ends and their influence begins. As you walk along the docks, you can feel the tension building. The Mafia has become an unstoppable force in New York, a criminal empire that is not only dictating the flow of goods but also the future of the city itself. The Navy may have initially turned to the Mafia to secure the harbor from German threats, but the balance has shifted. What was once a temporary alliance to protect the war effort has now become a struggle for control. The lines between military and Mafia have become hopelessly blurred. And you, an officer in the Navy, are caught in the middle of it. Every time you walk past a Mafia man, every time you see one of them looking over a shipment with cold, calculating eyes, you can't shake the feeling that they know something you don't. They know how to play the game, how to make their moves without anyone realizing it. They are everywhere, whispering in dark corners, pulling strings in backrooms, controlling the docks, and bending the city to their will. But you're starting to wonder, when does this cease to be about protecting New York, And when does it become about the Mafia controlling the very heart of the country's war effort? You watch as more Mafia men slip into the shadows, making deals with suppliers, receiving crates that have no business being in New York Harbor. You overhear snippets of conversations about goods not intended for the war effort, things that aren't even on the books. Illegal shipments. Smuggled goods. All of it slipping past military oversight as if the Mafia is the one truly in charge. As the weeks roll by, things grow darker. The Navy is still giving orders, but you realize that the Mafia is the one ensuring those orders are followed. Their reach is undeniable. They have infiltrated every layer of the harbor's operations, turning the military's watchful eye into a mere formality. And then, a phone call comes. It's late at night, your least favorite time to receive orders. You pick up the receiver, and a familiar voice on the other end greets you. It's a Navy officer, one you've worked with for years. He tells you that there's a situation at the docks. Another ship, another mysterious attack, and this time, the damage is worse. But there's more. The attack looks deliberate. You're told to head out immediately. As you rush to the harbor, your thoughts race. This isn't just another German U-boat strike, this is something else. Something much more complicated. As you arrive at the scene, you can feel it. The tension in the air. The Mafia men standing at the edges of the docks, their eyes scanning every corner. It's clear they've already been here, cleaning up whatever mess was made. The attack on the ship was precise. It wasn't random. Whoever did this knew exactly how to strike, and the marks on the ship tell a story. Marks that scream of a threat coming from within. The Navy's presence here is almost ceremonial, as if they're too late to do anything useful. The Mafia's men are the ones who are in charge of the investigation now. They're the ones who are controlling what information is being passed along. You approach one of the Mafia bosses, a man known for his ruthlessness, for his ability to manipulate and control every part of this operation. He gives you a quick nod. He knows what you're thinking. And, for a moment, he seems almost pleased. He leans in close, his breath heavy with the smell of cigars and whiskey, and whispers, "We're in charge now, kid. You've been playing our game for too long to pretend otherwise." Those words hit you like a punch to the gut. You realize the truth then. The Mafia has become more than just a shadow organization. They've become the heartbeat of New York's war effort. They control the flow of information, the movement of goods, and the safety of every ship that sails in and out of the harbor. The Navy may be in charge on paper, but the Mafia is the real power. It's a feeling you can't shake, no matter how hard you try. You walk through the darkened streets of the harbor, the faint sound of waves lapping against the piers, and you wonder, how much longer can the Navy survive this war when they're not the ones truly in control? As the days pass, you can't ignore the growing realization that this war, like so many others, is about more than just fighting the enemy. It's about controlling the flow of power. And right now, the Mafia controls New York. They control the docks, they control the war effort, and it's becoming clear that no one, not even the Navy, can do anything without their say-so. You hear rumors. Whispers that the Mafia has begun making deals with foreign powers, things that stretch beyond the borders of New York, beyond the United States. They're playing a much bigger game now, and the stakes are no longer just about protecting the harbor from the Nazis. Now, the Mafia's reach is global. They're not just securing the war effort, they're using it to secure their own empire. The real question is, how long will it be before the rest of the world realizes that the real war isn't being fought on battlefields overseas, but right here in the streets of New York, where power, loyalty, and betrayal collide in a deadly game? What happens when the shadows start to shift? The moon is high above New York Harbor, casting long, eerie shadows over the water, but tonight, it's not just the darkness that feels oppressive. It's the shifting tides, the unseen currents of power, moving beneath the surface, twisting and turning in ways that no one expected. What happens when the shadows you've been hiding in start to shift, and the truth begins to unravel? You've watched it all unfold, the rise of the Mafia's power, their iron grip over the docks, their growing control over the war effort. It seemed simple at first. The Navy needed them to secure the harbor. But now, the deeper you look, the more you realize that the Mafia's influence is not confined to New York or even to the war effort. No, their reach has spread far and wide, like an insidious disease that takes root in the very institutions meant to protect the nation. The attacks on ships have stopped, but something far worse is happening. The Mafia has grown bold, and the Navy has become a mere bystander in its own war. At first, it was subtle, small favors that the Mafia expected in return for their cooperation. But now, those favors are coming due, and the cost is much higher than anyone anticipated. As the days pass, you begin to hear rumors of a secret deal between the Mafia and certain high-ranking officials. A deal that could change the course of the war, and the fate of New York Harbor itself. You don't want to believe it, but the whispers grow louder. The Mafia is planning something. Something big. And if their plan goes through, it could tear apart everything the Navy has worked for. You're at the docks again, walking through the dimly lit alleyways, when you see him, the boss you spoke to just days ago. His face is grim, his expression dark. For a moment, you think he's going to speak, but he says nothing. Instead, he nods toward a small group of men standing in the shadows. Their faces are familiar, some of them you've seen on the piers, others in the backrooms of the city, but now they're different. Cold. Calculating. You approach cautiously, trying to make sense of what's happening. But as you get closer, you realize that they're not just discussing shipments or protecting the harbor, they're talking about something much bigger. A deal with the enemy. The truth hits you like a cold slap. The Mafia, the very men who have been helping the Navy, have struck a deal with the Germans. They've been feeding information to the enemy, guiding them to weak spots in the war effort, giving them intelligence on the shipping routes, the best times to attack. They've been playing both sides this whole time. You stand frozen in the dark, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. These men, who you thought were your allies, are now your worst enemies. The very people who were supposed to protect the harbor have been working to sabotage it all along. But why? What could possibly make them betray the country they were supposedly helping? The answer, you realize, is power. The Mafia has never cared about loyalty to any flag. They don't care about the war, they only care about what they can control. And right now, they're betting on the idea that the war will drag on for years, draining the country's resources, giving them the perfect opportunity to strengthen their own position. They're not just in it for money, they're in it for complete domination. The men in the shadows turn toward you now. One of them, a man with a weathered face and cold eyes, steps forward. "You've seen too much, kid," he says, his voice low. "But it doesn't have to be like this. You don't have to be a part of the war. You can stay out of it. Help us, and we can guarantee you'll never want for anything again." The temptation is there. The power they offer is real. And for a moment, you wonder what it would be like to walk away from all of this, to step into the shadows where the rules are simple, where survival comes with an unspoken understanding. But you can't. You know too much now. You've seen too much. The price of silence is too high. "You're making a mistake," you say, your voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "You're playing a dangerous game. And one day, it will catch up to you." The man smiles, but there's no warmth in it. "Maybe," he says. "But until then, we're winning. And you're just a small part of the machine." You walk away, but your mind is racing. You need to get word to someone who can stop this madness. But as you make your way back to the Navy's command center, something shifts in the air. There's a feeling, a cold sense of dread, that tells you that you're not going to be able to stop what's coming. The Mafia has its claws too deep in the city, too deep in the government. It's no longer just a fight against the Nazis. It's a fight against the people who were supposed to be your allies, the ones who have betrayed you, your country, and the war effort. As you walk through the dark streets, you can feel the weight of the city's secrets pressing down on you. The war is no longer just about survival. It's about betrayal, manipulation, and the terrifying realization that the enemy may not always be who you think it is. What happens when the shadows you trusted turn against you? When the men you relied on to protect you become the very ones working to tear it all down? The answer, you realize, is simple. Everything changes. The game has shifted, and the stakes are now higher than ever. The Mafia's grip on New York has grown so strong that it seems impossible to break free. And the worst part? No one, not even the Navy, knows just how deep this betrayal runs. As the night stretches on, you find yourself standing at the edge of the docks, watching the waves lap at the shore. The harbor seems quieter than usual, almost too still. It's as if the city is holding its breath, waiting for the next move. You wonder what will happen when the truth finally comes out. Will the Navy be able to reclaim control, or has the Mafia already won? What happens when the price of betrayal is too high? The air in New York Harbor feels thicker tonight, almost suffocating. The mist, usually a harmless cover, now seems like a shroud, hiding the truth, cloaking the city in a false sense of security. Beneath the surface, though, something is stirring, a shift, a breaking point. And you can feel it deep in your gut. What happens when the price of betrayal is too high? When the truth, buried in shadows for so long, finally breaks free. It's been days since you learned the truth about the Mafia's treachery. The whispers grow louder, the weight of the conspiracy impossible to ignore. The Mafia, once just a tool to protect the harbor, has now become the very thing it was supposed to stop. They've played both sides, betrayed their country, and secured their grip on power with a ruthless efficiency that even the Navy can't match. You can't keep quiet anymore. You can't ignore the gut-wrenching feeling that you're part of something far more dangerous than just a fight against the Germans. The stakes are no longer about saving New York Harbor from enemy forces, they're about saving the nation itself from the rot at its core. You try to go to the Navy Command Center, but it's clear that the situation has changed. The higher-ups aren't listening anymore. The men who once controlled the course of the war seem powerless against the forces they've unleashed. The Mafia's influence is everywhere, twisting every decision, pulling every string. But there's more at play than just a few corrupt individuals. The Mafia isn't just a problem, they've become the problem. And now, they're threatening to bring the entire war effort crashing down. As you walk down the darkened streets, you wonder, how much longer before everything unravels completely? How much longer can you keep playing this game where the stakes are life and death, and the people you've been trusting are the very ones betraying you? Your thoughts are interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind you. A familiar voice calls your name, and you turn to see one of your fellow officers approaching, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. "You need to come with me," he says, his voice strained. "We've got a problem. A big one." You follow him in silence, your heart racing. The sense of impending doom weighs heavily on you. What's happened now? You can't help but feel that the worst is yet to come. The Mafia has moved their pieces into place, and now, the final phase of their plan is about to unfold. When you arrive at the Navy's operations room, the tension in the air is palpable. The room is filled with men who are supposed to be in control, men who are supposed to be the leaders of this operation. But instead of the calm, collected officers you're used to, there's panic in the room. The generals and admirals look shaken, their eyes darting nervously around as if they're waiting for something to explode. It doesn't take long for someone to speak up, his voice filled with disbelief. The Mafia has been feeding information to the Germans. "We've just confirmed it." The words hang in the air like a death sentence. For a moment, the room is silent. Then chaos erupts. People shout, scramble to make sense of what's happening. But it's too late. The damage has been done. The Mafia's betrayal is no longer just a theory. It's a fact. And now, the Navy is scrambling to contain the fallout. The realization sets in, the Mafia has been feeding critical intelligence to the Germans, telling them everything from the shipping schedules to the positions of American troops. What started as a deal to protect the harbor has turned into a betrayal of epic proportions. The country's entire war effort is at risk. You stand in the middle of the chaos, your mind racing. The questions flood your thoughts. How did they do it? How long has this been going on? The Mafia has been playing both sides, and now they've pushed things too far. The truth is out. And there's no going back. But as the officers argue, a cold realization hits you. It's not just about protecting the harbor anymore. The Mafia has turned the war into their personal game. They've used the chaos of the conflict to expand their influence, to fortify their empire in ways that no one could have imagined. You hear a sharp voice cut through the noise. It's the voice of a general who's finally taking control of the situation. We need to act now. If the Germans know what we're doing, if they know our next move, we're finished. The room falls silent again. Everyone knows what needs to be done, but no one knows how. The Mafia's reach is so deep, so entrenched in the system, that even the military doesn't know who to trust anymore. Who can you turn to when the very people you've relied on have turned against you? Your mind flashes to the docks, to the men you've seen whispering in the shadows. They're not just criminals anymore. They've become the puppeteers of the entire city, the ones pulling the strings from behind the curtain. The Mafia has outsmarted the Navy, outmaneuvered every attempt at control, and now they are positioned to take everything. But it's not over yet. Not completely. A voice breaks through your thoughts. It's one of the officers, calling for your attention. We need to act quickly. The next convoy is scheduled to leave tomorrow. If the Mafia has compromised that route, it's game over. You feel the weight of the decision on your shoulders. The Navy needs to act fast. If the convoy is compromised, it could mean the loss of critical supplies, supplies that could change the course of the war. You know what you have to do, but the question remains, can you stop the Mafia's plans before it's too late? You leave the command center, your mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. You have to get to the docks. You have to find out what the Mafia is planning. But as you walk through the dark streets, you can't shake the feeling that you're too late. The Mafia's power has already spread too far. Their grip on the city, on the war effort, is too strong. The truth hits you hard. What happens when the betrayal is too big to fix? When the game has already been lost, and all you can do is watch it unravel. You make your way to the harbor, your steps quickening as the docks come into view. The fog is thick, and the air is heavy with the scent of salt water and oil. But there's something different tonight. The usual hum of the docks, the sound of workers unloading cargo, is gone. The silence is deafening. As you approach the pier, you see them, Mafia men, standing in the shadows, watching the water. They're not worried. They know they've already won. They've already set their plan in motion, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But then, just as you're about to walk forward, you hear a familiar voice call your name. It's the same boss you spoke 2 weeks ago. He steps out from the shadows, a smile on his face, as though he's been waiting for this moment all along. You've been trying to stop us, haven't you? He says, his voice smooth, almost amused. But it's too late, kid. The war's already ours. And in that moment, you realize the full extent of the Mafia's power, their reach, their influence, and the price you've all paid for trusting them. You've fought a war against the wrong enemy. The real enemy was here all along, lurking in the shadows, playing a game you could never win. The last thing you hear before everything fades to black is his voice, cold and final. The game's over. And we won.